Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Divided America, and all the sinking ships at sea. It's the John Ford Podcast, the Evening Rancor. Any links mentioned on the show are available at johnford.radio. Welcome to the Evening Rancor, the John Ford Podcast.
The show is on!
johnford.radio.
Well, it's been almost a year to the date that I did the last one of these podcasts. And I think the reason was because the whole pandemic thing started. And, one, it was depressing, as you would probably agree. But two, a lot of the ideas that I would get for the podcast would come from my daily excursions, things I would do. You sit at home picking your toes. It's not like you come up with a bunch of great ideas. Well, occasionally you can come up with one or two. But for the most part, the ideas that you would come up with to talk about, since I essentially talk to myself on this podcast, and hopefully you that's listening listen, you don't come up with good ideas just sitting on your own, thinking about, gee, when am I going to take my next shower? Wonder what's on TV. Let's watch another 50-year-old Western on MeTV. It doesn't exactly, make things inspiring. And plus, I never really went for the whole thing of having guests on the show because most guests are just insanely boring. However, I got kicked in the ass by somebody that I recently reconnected with. Somebody I did work with in the broadcast industry a number of years ago. And he's going to join us today as our guest. We're going to have our first John Ford podcast guest. And his name is Matt Ward. Anyways, Matt, thanks for joining the show today. Like as I was just saying, it's been a year since I've done one of these. I'm almost to the day.
Really?
Yes.
You're out of practice. Oh, I'm out of practice too.
Yeah, I suck.
We haven't done like radio or broadcast or whatever on audio together for like decades.
I don't even know how long it's been.
It's been a long time.
It was in the 80s?
It was in the 80s. It was the second term of Ronald Reagan.
Well, he was starting to forget, so
we're almost as old as he was then. I don't know.
Well, it's been a decade.
It's been like 3 decades.
Whatever, man. I'm too old to remember any of this crap. Anyways, we were talking, here you're trying to take control of the damn thing already. Anyways.
I'm being a nice guest. I'm being a nice house visitor here.
You are. I was mentioning that one of the reasons I didn't do guests, because so many podcasts do guests.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I'm going to revert to something here real quickly. I'm going to go in so many different directions because when I did radio, you weren't allowed to do that. You had to stay on track.
Think about the logic that creates.
One of the problems I have with podcasting is that you essentially end up talking to yourself. And if you don't end up talking to yourself, you get guests. And most of the people that are going to be guests are just boring as hell. They just are awful, Yeah. It's like and I spent a lot of years in talk radio. Now, this is after we worked together.
Oh yeah.
And we even worked with a lot of the same people, which is interesting, but we never crossed paths again. And we'll get to the radio station thing in a second. But the old school radio guys would have guests on, and it was always some boring guest trying to sell a book or something really stupid. Oh, and it was so terrible, so boring. The thing that made talk radio interesting was being able to take phone calls. They kind of like the records that you play,
Sure.
And you could just have different people. You have 30 seconds of this guy, 30 seconds of that guy.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really do that with a podcast. It doesn't. Nobody's really figured out how to do that kind of a thing yet.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Right. At least yet. I mean, maybe somebody will come along with something. There's this new thing, which if you have an iPhone, what's it called? Is it Telegram or? Oh, it's, where you do the live thing with just voice.
I don't know. I'm still up to like iPods,
Yeah.
So.
I'm sorry. So anyways.
They dragged me kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
I've always been kind of techie, so although now I'm just, people, they look at me with my gray hair and they assume, there's no way he knows anything about anything, you know?
Exactly.
But, I mean, I had all these Apple certifications, and I used to do that for a living for about 5 or 6 years until I got really bored with it.
Were you like at the Smart Bar, or what do they
No.
call that?
I was an independent contractor, so I would go set up, like, back when Apple had network computers, I'd set up the networks. Right. And, troubleshoot machines and do things like that. Work for, for small businesses mostly, because then it was mostly only small businesses that had Macs.
Right.
Now they're everywhere.
Yes.
Anyways, let's get away from all this.
Okay.
And let's get to what we're going to talk about. Many years ago, we worked together at a radio station in Long Branch, New Jersey.
Beautiful Long Branch, by the shore.
It was a dump back then.
They've cleaned it up a bit.
It was a dump. Remember the Chinese joint that was underneath the radio station?
Yes. And around the corner was Cuzo's, the Italian place. Everybody went there for their
pizza. That's right. I mean,
McDonald's is still there. McDonald's is like the only thing.
Yeah, that was like west 3 blocks. What was the street that the radio station, the call letters were WMJY, right?
It was on Broadway in Long Branch.
On Broadway.
And it was 156 Broadway, and that building has been demolished, which at that time, you felt like a bulldozer could come through any minute and knock it down while you were in there. It was that dilapidated of a building.
It was a dump. We were on the second floor, and I remember that. Now, I was hired, before I got hired, I was teaching. I was working at a small college in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, teaching broadcasting. Teaching kids how to be broadcasters. God, wonder what they do now. Because there is no more broadcasting.
They've obviously moved on to something else.
Matt, they done killed the damn thing.
Bye-bye.
Well, but I was going to ask you, the question was, like, how in the world did you wind up going from here? You grew up in Florida.
Right.
You're in the South. And how do you wind up coming to Long Branch, New Jersey? Like, how does that happen?
Well, there was an ad, and I had been kind of out of, the quote-unquote radio biz for a while. I had been teaching for about 3 or 4 years, and I figured, hey, this is an easy gig. They pay okay. It's got, good health insurance, whatever. And there was an ad in Radio and Records, which was the trade paper of note.
Right.
Which no longer exists.
Yeah, they just went out of business.
Nothing exists. It's all dead. It's all gone. Yeah. Radio is dead and gone.
Okay.
Well, you still work in radio.
No, I'm still in radio, so it's not dead yet. I'm going to be the last one out.
Yeah, they're going to wheel you out the door, and you're going to be whining and screaming, hey, I don't want to go.
Yes. I'm just waiting for the gold watch, but nobody wears watches anymore.
Only if they shove it up your rectum.
Oh, my God.
That's the only way you're going to get a gold watch so they can take a look.
Right.
So anyways, I was working at this school teaching, and there was an ad in Radio and Records, and it was for a program director and I was like, I should get back into radio.
No.
So I took the job, and they didn't pay all that much. I mean, it paid okay, but it was actually paying less than I was making.
Oh, wow. So you made all that effort to go like 1,000 miles or more north.
I figured it was an adventure.
For less money.
I was still young, It's an adventure, right? So, and plus, I'll be the program director. God bought it, everybody. So,
but at first you weren't on the air. You
That's
were
right.
there for a few months,
That's
walking
right.
around in your moccasins.
Yes,
and people were looking at you with the side eye. What's this guy doing?
Yeah, and basically they brought me. Ian Case was the one who essentially hired me, and then there was he later went on to do other stuff. And
he went to 1,000 different radio stations and is still around.
The last I heard, he was doing we'll get to that later. So he was basically hired by Ian Case, and there was a general manager of the radio station who shall go nameless, who was an asshole. I mean, this guy, you look up asshole in the dictionary, and there's a picture of this man's face. As a matter of fact, you look up asshole in the encyclopedia, and it leads you to the dictionary with a picture of that man's face.
Now, be nice. Come on.
No, he was an asshole.
Right?
There was another colleague of ours. You remember the Mudman?
Mudman,
for a while?
Yeah, I talked to him not too long ago.
Mud had great nicknames for a lot of people.
What did he call him?
His nickname was the Asylum.
What did he call me?
You did? I don't think you had a nickname.
I kind of get along with everybody.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, no, you never had a nickname.
Yeah,
which is a good thing.
I guess. So they basically brought me in to work with the talent. That was the whole thing, and to kind of switch the thing from CHR Top 40 to kind of this CHR-AOR hybrid, rock.
Right.
Which was kind of dumb. And eventually we just kind of went rock. That's what happened. So
rock hits home.
Rock hits home. It was a dumb slogan. But it worked. I hear they got a great book.
Yeah, they did pretty good.
So, anyways, it was after I left, but I gave them a great book.
We took credit for it after you did all the work.
I'm sure you did. So, anyways, the asshole. We don't have.
You were there to work with the
talent.
No, he called him the asylum. You called him the other thing, and
the asshole asylum.
And so you came in to work with the talent that we had. And we had some good people. I mean, Vic Kelly was the afternoon guy, I think.
Whose real name was Vic Porcelli.
Vic Porcelli.
And the asshole made him change his name because he thought it was too Italian.
He changed it from Italian to Irish.
Yeah, why? Huh? How many Irishmen are on that Jersey Shore show? None. That was so stupid, that guy. So
Bob Marks is the midday guy.
Bob Marks, I don't remember him.
Tom Lipke, remember Tom?
Tom, that name sounds familiar. He was on at night?
He was on at night, and Tom, by the way, he did get out of radio. He now works as like Border Patrol in Arizona.
Good God. Out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Yeah. And then we had Garrick Hart. Remember Garrick?
No, I don't. That's terrible.
Maybe he came in after you.
Remember the nerdy guy that ran the computer system?
Yes. And I have a great story about him, too.
Okay, well,
we can get into that later on.
So, yeah. Now, we can chop this up, and, this could end up being 3 shows. Who knows?
Probably.
So
the radio files, the radio stories.
That's right. So, and if, look, the loving listener, if you find this boring, we don't care. It just, we're not getting paid for this. There's no program director. Go to hell. Tune out. We don't care. We're just doing this anyways. So, yeah, that nerdy guy. And then after I was there for a couple of months, then the asylum, the unnamed
You've
guy.
adopted the name. I like that.
Right, okay. He wanted to fire Ian Case. And I'm like, why? He says, I don't know. I want to get rid of him. He's bad. He's wrong for this, I think it was probably money.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So he made me, twisted my arm behind my back and made me fire this Ian Case guy, who I liked. He was a nice guy.
Yeah, he is a nice guy.
And it was a drag that I had to do it. And then he stuck me doing mornings. So that I'm doing mornings with you.
Yeah, well, I was doing the evening show at that point, and I'd done mornings for a long time with Ian, and then they moved me to the night show when they went to the hybrid rock format, and then you had asked me to come in and do the news in the morning. And I was like, I really didn't want to do that because, getting up early and doing news.
It's a pain in the ass.
But you were dead set on that, and so we did it. So for a few months, it was like Ford and Ward in the morning.
Do you have any air checks of that?
I probably do. In fact, we're cleaning out a lot of stuff here in the house, and I'm going to find some of these because but I was doing news, so I would try to throw in kicker stories at the end of the news, and then that way you could kind of riff off of those before getting back in. But, after you left, they made me the morning man, and I kept the title of the show, which was The Rock and Roll Awakening.
Right. No, that's actually not too bad.
Yeah. No, that you came up with that.
Oh, did I?
And I
no wonder I like. No wonder I like. Oh, quit talking at the same time. Don't do that.
Stop that.
Hey. No wonder I like it.
I also wound up doing Psychedelic Sunday, which they gave me after you left, too.
Right.
But anyway, continue with your story. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no. That's fine. So they maybe fire you and then do mornings. Now, I'm having to do mornings and program a radio station, which is never a good idea. Yeah. Never a good idea.
But, for them, they're thinking, well, we're paying this guy. We're going to put him on the air, too.
Yeah. And, I was okay on the air. I was all right. I wasn't great.
Well, it was a music show, mostly.
Yeah, it was a music show. We were playing music.
You were very laid back.
And I'll tell you what, man, it was the first time I ever had to do snow closings. Oh, and then just for hours you would read that stupid crap on the air. Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
And, I'm like, can't we come up with a better way to do this? Can't we record all this and put it on the phone and just have people call the phone number?
Couldn't they come up with the internet and have people go to that and to go to the station website? Oh, wait, this is before all. This was the Stone Age of broadcasting.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many mornings I wanted to say, look, the school's probably closed. Call the school. We're going to play records and have a radio program, okay? And if you don't like that, go listen to, what was it, WJOK or whatever it was down there.
Yes, because they were famous for their school closings.
Oh,
so let them do 20 minutes of school closings while we play six records.
What are you going to get out of that? So you finally hear your school, you're gone.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to stick around and listen to this, person going, and Blow Flap School in Manalapan is closed today. And this just went on for hours and hours and hours. Yep. It's snowing. There's no school. Stay home.
And it had to be alphabetical.
And if you get in trouble, have them call me. All right?
Yeah.
It had to be.
I got in trouble once at a radio station because I didn't go in alphabetical order. I had no time.
Oh
I had to do sports, and they wanted me to, and I didn't.
The silly
how am I
crap.
Do this.
The silly crap they would have you do.
So I read Solomon Schechter Academy before I read Brookdale.
That's nonsense.
Yeah. So anyways, then, there was all kinds of strange things that went on there. And my little office, you could go out onto the roof.
Under the roof.
Yeah, to smoke weed or whatever we wanted to smoke out there, which was always kind of interesting. It was a cool little old studio. It was very old school.
It was
old school radio
like a
station.
real radio station. Although, you mentioned the roof, and one time there was a snowstorm, and
it caved in.
No, there was a dish on the roof that got the signal from the Associated Press for the wire, and the copy started coming in garbled. So I called the asylum and told him about it, and he said, "Well, go out on the roof and clear the dish." I said, "Am I insured? Like I'm not going out with 6 inches of snow out on the flat roof and wipe the dish off."
Yeah, I mean, in New York, they have engineers that get paid big union wages to do that stuff.
Yeah,
they do.
So I don't know what happened.
They do. They got there with a broom, and sweep the thing out. So let me just. So what eventually happened, how I left that radio station, I had to go to Florida for the weekend, and I think we were doing some stupid contest to win a car, a Volkswagen Cabriolet.
But he had one of them little red sports cars and a big shotgun.
And that weekend we were going to give it away, and I'm like, okay, you guys can handle this. I've got to go. I've got to go to Florida. My stepfather's having cancer surgery. I got to be there, right? So I come back, and I get back literally Sunday night, 2:00 in the morning at the airport at Newark, and it's snowing, and my battery's dead. So I got to call the people to come give me a jump. I finally get a jump after about an hour and a half. Woo-hoo! Went home. It's about 4:30 in the morning. Had some coffee, something to eat, and then went into the radio station. I had not slept the whole night. We did the show together, Matt and I, who I'm talking to, Matt Ward.
Right.
Say hi, Matt.
Hi.
And after the show, the asylum, this general manager from hell, this crazy man, he comes after me and corners me and starts yelling at me about all the things that went wrong with this contest, right? And how it was all my fault and that because I wasn't there. And I'm like, look, dude, I had to go to Florida. My stepfather was having cancer surgery. And he's like, well, he's not even your real father. I'm like, wait a second. Oh, he actually said that to me. So we ended up getting into this yelling match in the hall. And I just looked at him and I said, you know what? And this was the only time I have ever done this in a radio gig. I've done it in other jobs.
What'd you do?
Well, I looked at him and I said, I forget my exact words, but it was something along the lines of, you are a complete asshole. And I no longer work here. I quit. Take this job and shove it up your rectum. And he started screaming back at me. And I backed up my stuff and walked out the door. And I think you saw me leaving.
That was the funny part, is that I don't know where I was coming from, because maybe it was after the show. I went out to get something, and I just remember walking along the sidewalk of Broadway, heading back to the radio station, and you're going in the other direction, carrying boxes. I'm thinking, where's he going?
Yeah, he's leaving, man.
And next thing I know, I'm called into the office about, hey, do you want to do the morning show?
It makes no sense.
And that's how I found it. And I don't think it was like, I don't know. I mean, I think... I don't recall exactly. I would have to see if I have anything written down somewhere in old notebooks. But I was under the impression that you were fired.
Oh no!
I didn't know that you quit. But maybe I'm just misremembering it. But But anyway, you were
I'm
gone,
sure they
so...
would. Why would he have told anybody? He would want people to have thought that I got fired.
Well, he would have thought, that you were fired, because that was the thing about that station, is that
he fired everybody.
Everybody eventually got fired, but you and I both actually quit before we were fired. So
I don't
it
know
was
if that's
kind of an accomplishment, actually.
Yeah, I guess it's a good thing.
No, because you were beat. You realized it was probably going to happen anyway.
Look, I was a total jerk, and I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. I've had enough. Goodbye. Out of here. Yeah. And I was so angry. I was so pissed off because he was such a jerk, right? I went home to where I was living. I had a house I was renting in Middletown, which was
very, very nice.
Well, it was right across the river from Red Bank, right?
Oh, okay. You were on the Navasink. That's like where Bon Jovi lived for years.
Oh yeah. Well, doesn't he own the Penske? Didn't he own the Penske estate, the old Penske estate down there?
It may be.
Yeah. Anyways, I was so pissed. So I went there and I wrote a letter to the owners.
Damn.
Now, this is like a mom and pop radio station.
And they lived in Rumson, which is like this really expensive area, which was where Bruce used to live.
Right.
And you'd see him driving around in that white Impala convertible. Did you ever see him driving around? I used to see him all the time.
No.
And Clarence Clements, right? Clarence Clements, the guy that played the saxophone, the big man. Yeah. I used to see him at the A&P in what was it? It begins with a B down there on the beach.
Belmar?
No, not Belmar. Bright. Seabright. I used to see him at Seabright shopping at the A&P, and the guy was like 6'15", right? Yeah. And he had a pink. His car was like an early '60s pink Cadillac, and his custom New Jersey license plate said, "My car." That's true. And he probably grew up, thinking, well, man, one of these days I'm going to get myself a 1962 pink Cadillac, just like Elvis had, and I'm going to put my license plate on it that says "My car."
And then Bruce will sing about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So anyways, I wrote this letter, and I went to their house in Rumson. They weren't home. So I stuck it in the mailbox. And basically the letter was this 3-page diatribe of how much the general manager, the asylum, was an asshole. How much of a jerk, what he had done. Mm-hmm. All the stuff, I listed all these things that he had done, just hoping that maybe they would fire him. I guess they didn't, right?
No, he was there till they changed owners, and then they fired everybody.
Well, of course. And you said he's a used car salesman now?
Well, I think that's what he was doing before he came to the radio station.
Well, of course it was. He was...
And then went back into that line of work because, even he got out of radio.
Yeah, this is always one of the problems with broadcasting is that people end up, coming from the sales. There's nothing wrong with being a salesman. If you're a salesman, God bless you, we love you. But they end up coming from the sales department and then end up being the general manager, running the radio station,
It's the money side, the money side of the business that the owners were concerned with.
Of course, but these people have no concept of how to run a radio station outside of billing, right?
Yeah.
There was now we both have worked with a guy that is famous in talk radio whose name is Walter Sabo. Mm-hmm. He told me a story one time when he was consulting, I think it was the Rogers Group in Canada. And they have an edict at the Rogers Group, which is a big corporate radio ownership, back then. I don't know if it even still exists today. But he said, the owner of Rogers Group told Walter that they would never, ever hire anybody from the sales department to run as a general manager of one of their radio stations. They only hire program directors to run the radio stations. And Walter was like, well, why? He says, because the sales guys will just screw it up. They don't know anything about the product. I need somebody that knows about the product running the radio station.
Right.
Let the sales manager do the billing and handle all that, but the person running the radio station needs to be from the product background.
Yeah.
Pretty obvious, but, I always thought that was a good story.
Yeah,
so,
that's a good way to do it.
Yeah. So eventually I packed up all my stuff, went back to Florida, and got a job at Zeta 4 in Miami as the production director at Zeta. Mm-hmm. So anyways, I went back to Florida and got a job at Zeta 4 in Miami, which was a rock station. Basically the creative service director. I also handled production, but it was mostly just doing the imaging for the radio station. And I was going to buy a house, right? But I had not gotten my W-2 from the radio station in New Jersey.
So you had to make a phone call?
Oh, I had to try and call them multiple times, and there was a young lady who was like the office manager, and I called her, and I called the crazy guy, and they would just yell at me, and they just said, well, we're not going to send it. And they said, okay, we'll finally send it. So they sent, I said, just send it first to the person that's trying to handle my mortgage, to the mortgage person, right?
Right.
And then she'll give it to me so I can get this house bought so they can see my last year's taxes. So I get a call a couple days later, from the woman at the mortgage company. She says, well, something kind of strange happened. I got the letter. They FedExed your information, kind of, from that radio station, and I opened it up, and it was a rubber chicken. They didn't send the W-2.
Oh, for God's sake.
They sent a rubber chicken.
Well, that took a lot of effort, a lot of thought.
Well, my girlfriend at the time used to call me Chicken. So they thought they'd be funny, and they sent a chicken in the mail, a rubber chicken. I laughed.
Right.
And then I called a friend of mine who was an attorney, and I said, okay, look, this is what's happening. We're trying to buy the house, and they won't send me my tax records, and they sent a rubber chicken to the mortgage. So he's like, okay, let me make a call. About 15 minutes later, he calls. He got the information of where to call the WMJY in New Jersey. I told you I had a couple good stories about this.
Yeah, I never heard this story before.
Yeah, this is the rubber chicken story. And this is true, so help me God. So he called me back about 15 minutes later. He says, okay, they'll have the W-2 there tomorrow at the mortgage company. I said, well, what did you do? He said, I told them that I was going to sue them, and you'd end up owning the radio station if they didn't send that W-2 to the mortgage company within 24 hours. You can't do that.
No shit, Sherlock.
And that was the end of the whole thing. And then the mortgage company lady gave me the rubber chicken, which I think I still have somewhere.
You still have.
So yeah, that just shows you the kind of person that we were dealing with, that we worked with at WMJY.
Yeah, there were a lot of crazy stories. I mean, people were known to get fired for, one sales guy got fired for not showing up at a softball game or getting there late. There were air check kits put on the wall when he wanted to send the message that people are going to get fired.
What is an air check kit?
Well, it would basically, it'd be like getting a new job kit. It was like up on the bulletin board where it had a cassette tape, and here's what you use to put your crummy show on, and then there'd be like a magic marker or something to write your resume with, or it was like crazy stuff like that. And I got called in. This is before you got there. When
it's like management by intimidation.
When they were still a top 40 station, the afternoon guy was a great guy by the name of Phil Britton. And Phil was very talented, went out to, after he left New Jersey, went to Kalamazoo for the longest time.
Right.
And he could have been in New York. He was a great top 40 jock. And
good morning, everybody.
When he
it's
and the guy was about
Britton in the morning on WMJY 107.
No, he was the afternoon guy. He was about 9 feet
that's Phil
tall.
Britton in the afternoon on Y107. Good morning, everybody. Oh wait, good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah. He did the afternoon show, and then he did like a countdown show on Saturdays.
He could count. This was a top 40 disc jockey that actually was able to count.
He counted
He could
backwards.
count? Did he have to take off his shoes?
He wore loafers. He never had to tie his shoes.
Oh, the loafers, no, they're all in the sales department.
So Phil had there were one day, I guess he was come into some kind of a disagreement with the asylum, and
the asylum.
I don't know what was going on. I was doing
the man that shall not be mentioned.
Yes, I was doing the sports in the morning, so I went home and I'm like sleeping, and I suddenly get this phone call from, I think it was from somebody in the office, and they said, listen, the asylum needs you to come into the radio station to meet with him around 2 o'clock or whatever. So I'm like, well, what is it about? Well, they wouldn't tell me. So I'm like, oh, great, I'm probably getting fired, or did I mess up a commercial, or what's going on? I get to the radio station, and he says, oh, never mind. I was afraid the afternoon guy wasn't going to show up, and I needed a backup for him, so you can leave.
Oh, man.
I drove like 30 minutes to get there. I'm like, that's it? And there was, now, prior to your arrival, too, when they were still top 40, and I guess they were they were thinking about going to this rock format, they had a guy in the evening, another great guy by the name of Shady Dan.
Shady Dan.
Shady Dan. And Shady did the night show where he, like the 7 to midnight, and his show was very teen appeal. He did requests and dedications. His whole rap was like, he'd come on and he'd go, Shady Dan, bearded, weirded, long-haired, seldom scared on a twisted Tuesday. Phone lines are open, they're burning and a buzzing at 222-9262. And then he would do all the dedications.
You remember all this?
Oh, yeah, because he was on every night. He had the Whacked Out Wednesday, the Thoroughly Thumping Thursday, the Freaked Out Friday.
Now, see, I would have fired this guy immediately.
He used to call me Matt Psycho Ward.
Actually, that's kind of good. I like that.
So they decided, and the thing was, now he had been there even before they were Y107. So, and I guess they trusted him because they said, "Listen, we're going to let you go," but they let him do a final show. And Shady Dan was a big bike rider, so when he did his last
bicycle
break,
or motorcycle,
like a motorcycle, he was a biker. He had the long hair. He was Harley, scared.
Yeah.
He was bearded and weirded. So he did like a whole rap on his last thing, riding out of the studio for the last time, and he played the motorcycle sound effects, and it was great. So they let him go, and then for his replacement, they put on the overnight guy whose name was Andy Miller. And Andy's actually still in radio today, actually working on the same radio station, but they're now known as The Boss. They play like rock and roll, like classic rock.
Right.
And he's now Drew Miller. But Andy was kind of
Which is a good name for a station in the Jersey Shore, let's face it.
Yeah. So, but Andy was a little young, maybe a little cocky, and him and the Asylum did not get along at all. And he was the only guy that I know of. Now, I know this probably happened many times in the business, but he actually got fired mid-shift. He went in, and it was planned because the Asylum called another part-time disc jockey, Don Tandler.
Now that name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was Don Tandler. He was actually he was made to use Don Tanner on Y107. For some reason, Tandler wasn't good enough.
Well, but I remember this guy. Not remember him, but I remember the name. But there was a guy on Y100 in Miami called Don Tanner.
Totally different guy.
For many years,
I believe.
Yeah, totally different guy.
Yeah. So they had Don come to the radio station. You remember in the studio, there were 2 doors that got into the studio. There was the newsroom door
and the
behind
studio door, right?
And then there was a studio door to the right. So they brought Don in and moved him into the newsroom. And then they told Andy to come out to the hallway for a second. And when he was in a commercial break, so he had gone into the spot, was ushered out of the studio, and then they brought Don in through the newsroom door, and suddenly Don was on the air, and that was the end of Andy.
Wow.
And so he was fired on the air for some argument they had, and that was the end of that. But, crazy times. And then you came in as the mild-mannered boss who was going to calm everything down, I guess.
But the things did calm down a bit.
They did.
Kind of.
But,
sorta.
The Asylum was still...
Yeah. Oh, he was nuts. The man sent me a rubber chicken in the mail for a W-2 form, for God's sakes. I mean,
but he didn't even send it to you.
No, he sent it to my mortgage broker.
That's even worse.
Yes.
Because they're like, what's this crazy John Ford?
Right.
Why is his people sending us a rubber chicken?
Yeah,
what disrespect.
She's talking to me on the phone. She goes, I don't quite know how to tell you this, but, they didn't send a W-2. There's a rubber chicken in the FedEx envelope. What kind of person was this that you worked for?
And it probably costs more to play that prank because that weighs more than just sending your tax forms.
Yeah, and what's funny is that I remember when I was interviewing for the job at Zeta 4, the program director there was a guy by the name of Pete Bolger, who's been around forever. I mean, he was. He stayed in Miami. Good God, 25 years he was there. Then he was at WINS, and he was at WIOD for many years. Then went to run the big Clear Channel AM station in San Antonio at the mothership for Clear Channel, KT. I can't remember the call it is. And then went and programmed WLS, and recently retired and lives now in Portland. Anyways, I told him, I said, look, the guy, he's like, well, why did you leave New Jersey? I said, because the guy was a flaming asshole. I couldn't work for this man.
Right?
And he's like, well, you know, we all have bad stories. You know, he couldn't have been that bad. And I said, no, Pete. I said, the man was the worst ever that I've ever worked for. He was a complete idiot and a flaming asshole on top of that.
Yes.
And I said, and he's like, well, I don't really like it when, you know, people badmouth their boss. I said, okay, here. I said, here, okay, fine. Here's what happened with my mortgage. And I told him the story. And he just laughed and laughed and laughed. And he called me the next day and hired me.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. It used to be one of my old friends that I worked with in Detroit, who was a famous morning guy in San Francisco for many years, by the name of M. Dung. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No.
He was a big deal at KFOG in San Francisco for many, many years. He was a morning guy there. And he was real high energy for an AOR jock, which was kind of strange, right? But he finally got out of the business and went to work for Apple. And he said, he always had the famous phrase that I always loved. He said, I got tired of getting fired for a living.
Yeah.
As to why he got out of radio. And the rest of the world has suddenly caught up to where broadcasting is. Now, never everybody gets fired for no reason. And, and ping pongs and bounces from one job to the next.
Yeah.
But we dealt with it for years.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I've been pretty fortunate. I only have thankfully gotten canned a couple of times. Once because of budget cuts, supposedly, and another time because station was just closing. That was when I went down to Florida very briefly before I came back up to New Jersey, and it was a little AM station that just wasn't going to make it, and you know, so it was kind of like, oh, for your last week, can you do inventory? And this was a guy who actually, I think he never registered his business in Florida.
Wow. Inventory for a radio station.
Speaking of W-2s, I mean, first of all, after I got let go, this is from this little AM station in the middle of Florida in Leesburg.
Where's Leesburg? Is up by Ocala?
Yeah, it's north of Orlando by maybe half hour, 45 minutes.
Oh, sure, I know where it is. Yeah, there's an exit right off of the turnpike there.
It's right off the Florida Turnpike, Route 27, 441. Wow, I think the radio station was on 441. We were right across from a speedway and right next and shared a building with a car rental company. And we were working for an owner who was again just a guy that ran an ad agency, and he was from New Jersey, and he was opening up a station down there.
What was the format?
It was like
what
an
kind
oldies.
Of a station was
it was an AM oldies. He called it Famous Rock. We were Famous Rock 1320
on AM, which no one listened to.
AM. Yeah, and like at night they had a power down to like less than a light bulb. I mean, it was
that's the way Florida AMs are because of Cuba.
Yeah.
That's basically why.
And the transmitter was in a little town called Coleman. And if you were sitting outside the radio station, as I was one morning when I got there in the summertime of 1988, I could barely hear the radio station that I was sitting outside of, but yet I could hear WCBS in New York.
Straight up and down,
coming
baby.
in through very powerfully. There was a massive heat wave going on in the city at the time. And I remember listening to that going, wow, this is amazing that I'm hearing a station 1,100 miles away.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't hear the one that I'm sitting right in front of.
The signal could go straight up and down. I mean, that was like with like WIOD in Miami, who I was the program director for when it was a talk station. During the day, man, you could hear that thing anywhere in the state. You know, It was huge, 50,000-watt radio station. But at night, the pattern, you know, and you'd go out to where the tower farms for these stations were, and they'd all like have 8 or 9 towers so they could have this really odd pattern so that they could protect Cuba is really what it was all about. And, you know, you couldn't hear WIOD and, you know, maybe 50 miles north of Miami at night. It was,
wow.
You know, and this was one of, I mean, this is the station Larry King started on.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Miami used to be this great talk market, but they killed it.
He's dead, Jim.
So this owner that I worked for in Florida, and he was a nice guy. Reminded me of John Candy, actually, although not quite as funny. But and he just he had these pie-in-the-sky dreams. We're going to become the flagship station for Orlando Magic basketball because they were kind of a new franchise at the time. And he was going to do an engineering study to raise the power, but you had another station on the same frequency up in Jacksonville.
Right.
That was not just... So this guy was throwing money into it, and it was just kind of a fun diversion to go work there for a little while. But at the end of the day, when we wound up, I found out we went off the air when somebody who worked in the office, an older lady, came in and said, the station's not on the air. And it turned out
really?
the owner hadn't paid the rent on the transmitter space
where
it was in the field. So the guy went out and shut the power off, which, I don't know, that sounds like a violation to me. You're interfering with a federal
well, not only
licensed...
that, I mean, usually doesn't the radio station own the land that the tower is on?
No, they didn't own it. They rented, and I guess that was inherited from a previous owner.
That's the screwiest thing I ever heard of.
Yeah, so we went off the air. So I called the owner, and he back in New Jersey, and he says, so we're off the air. I'm going to sell the station. He said, can you do some inventory for me?
No.
And he said, oh, and by the way, he goes,
You're fired.
If you need any money, just call me, and I'll write you a check. And I'm thinking, well, that's ridiculous. I think I would like to just go to get unemployment. And when I went to do that, they said, oh, guess what?
He never paid his unemployment
We don't
insurance.
know what this company is.
Yeah. That's a good one.
And then I did a similar thing to you, calling to get the W-2 at the end of the year.
You didn't get a rubber chicken, though.
I did not get a rubber chicken. No rubber, but the guy's attitude was totally different on the phone. It was like he never knew me. It's like, well, okay, we'll get that in the mail to you. Thank you very much.
You never saw it.
No, we did get it. We did get it. No chicken, but we did get the W-2.
Well, what's funny is, you're talking about how they didn't own the land the tower was on. Now we're at an age where radio stations, especially AM radio stations, are so devalued that they just shut them off and they sell the land that the towers were on because it's worth more than the actual license for the radio station.
Wow, yeah.
People don't realize this, but when you run a radio station, when you own, quote unquote, a radio station, you don't own anything. You own a piece of paper from the federal government that says you have the right to broadcast on X frequency.
Right.
The only thing you may own is the building where your studio is at, or usually the tower site. It's like the tower sites in L.A. that, up there on the...
right.
They're thinking about selling that. There was a huge sale. I think it was in D.C. not too long ago, where they sold the tower farm for this radio station and just, made millions and millions of dollars.
Well, then there's all of the equipment that's around, too. Like the boards and all that.
Right.
But all of that is going to get shrinking to the size of your hand.
What was it? It's not worth anything. I mean, except for like a collector, all that old analog stuff.
Yeah.
Because everything can run on a computer. Back when I was a boy.
You remember the old carousels?
Carousels.
Like the automation systems.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. That's we're getting way too deep into the...
Oh, just to kind of explain it, a lot of the old AM radio stations used to be automated, right? Like today they do this voice tracking thing, sort of the same kind of thing. But that's where like one person does the voice for many radio stations. But you had automated, so you have like an FM that was maybe live and an AM that had maybe a morning show and an afternoon show, and then they had the automation for like the rest of the day.
Right.
And it looked like these giant IBM computers. And you had to program them, but it had punch boards where you would stick the little pens in to tell it where to take breaks and where to, do things. And these round carousels, which had the carts in it, which looked like 8 tracks for people that weren't in radio.
Right.
And each one of them would have like you'd have like a station break, and it would say, "You're listening to 1510 on the radio dial. Beautiful, blah, blah, blah," right? And you would program it to come up at that time. And then it would go to the next event. It would like the cassette, the cart would come out, the 8-track, and it would go clunk. And then the carousel would turn and load the next one, right?
Yep.
And these things were complicated as hell.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you think about like how, before digital computers, they had computers that were like an abacus. These were kind of the same thing because it had a punch board. Later on, they had ones that actually had computers in it. But you had to stick little pens in it to tell it where to do the next, what they would call event, the next thing. And
then sometimes somebody would forget to put a cart in the slot.
Or nobody cared about the AM. The hell with it. And you had these big reels of the music to change, and people go, nobody listens to this thing anyways. And they wouldn't put the new one on. They just rewind the old one and let it run again. Oh, so it'd be like the same songs over and over. Right?
Exactly. And nobody cared.
Nobody cared. Nobody listened to the AM.
Nope.
Now, when I worked at WSHE in Miami, it was that way with the AM, which was Surf, which was a very cool little top 40 radio station at one time, and then it became this awful country station.
You people are rednecks. That means I'm enjoying this shit.
And that's what we would do, because it would be, okay, so it's at night, I did 6 to 10 at night. It's your job to put the new tapes on, on Surf. You would just go back there and rewind them.
When I did weekends for a while on WJLK. This is back in the 90s on their FM. This is in Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And their AM was running an automated format. So once in a while we would go in and we would go swing the AM. So you would just go into the studio, and while their automation is playing, at an appropriate time, maybe during a song, I think they were doing oldies at the time, you would just put the mic on, slide that mic pod up, and you would just go, swing, and then just leave. And we called it swinging the AM. It was just one of those things you did, just to have fun.
I keep hearing squeaking doors. Is that you?
Yeah, that's, we're broadcasting from the home place today, so there's activity going on.
So am I, but, I got my door shut.
Yeah. No, we don't have doors here.
You don't have doors? What, do you live in a barn?
Listen, the business of life goes on. You're in front of your microphone, and garage doors need to open and close.
Whatever. So, what do you do now, Matt? Tell us what does a Matster do? What's your big gig these days, Matt? What keeps you going? What keeps you alive? Hello? Uh-oh. I think we lost him. This is one of the reasons why, having guests is a pain in the ass. Now, if we were broadcasting live, everybody'd be freaking out because, there'd be like dead air.
Hello?
Hey there. Hello?
Oh, yeah, I banged on the desk and it was like, suddenly you were gone. So, as you were saying.
That'd be a good song. I banged on the desk and suddenly
and you were gone.
It's a hit to the top of the bullet on the charts, babe. So, now I was asking, don't worry, I could edit all that.
I'm a professional traffic broadcaster.
Is that right? In New York, though, in the New York metro area.
Yeah, when I was leaving Florida, I came back, and all my connections were in New Jersey. So I'm like, what am I going to do? And a friend of mine was working at what was then known as shadow traffic, which
I remember that. Uh-huh.
Yeah, which had been in New York for like 10 years at that point.
Yeah, we had those in Miami too. I see everything they have in New York, they have in Miami.
Yeah,
yeah.
So
it's another borough.
I did not want to do. I'm like, traffic. What do I know about traffic? And that doesn't sound very interesting to me. And then, I went up, and first, the whole process of learning everything you needed to know, like they had abbreviations for every road, and there were symbols and
all kinds
of shorthand. It was like the shorthand.
And you get so many little towns there through New Jersey, and oh my God.
New Jersey, Connecticut, Long Island, and so it was a whole process. But, it was a job, and it was being on New York radio, and I trained for like a couple of weeks, and then was put on some part-time shifts, and this is like the summer of like going 1989.
Right.
And I wound up getting a full-time regular shift. My main station for like 27 years was 1010 Winds in New York.
Do you still do 1010 Winds or not?
Well, we no longer have the contract for them, so they went with.
So sad.
They kind of took it in house, basically.
Right.
No, but and it actually worked out very well. I mean, I work for what is now Total Traffic, which is run by iHeartMedia, and
those guys.
Well, they've been very good to me, and
iHeart been very good to me. I cannot say
traffic
anything
has been
bad
very good
about
to me.
them.
I cannot say that.
I can say this is me. This is not Matt. That I've been fired by Clear Channel and iHeart numerous times.
Well, did they send you a rubber chicken?
They did not.
They did not.
They were too corporate. They knew they knew better than to send John Boy an old rubber chicken there. It's a drag. I listen to 1010 Wins. I've got one of those Google smart speakers in my bathroom, so when I'm taking a shower or my morning constitutional, I'll say, "Hey Google, stream 1010 Wins." But I never heard you on there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you can actually hear me around the country because I do the traffic for Sirius XM in New York.
You do?
If anyone has satellite radio every afternoon on channel 133, it's traffic, weather, and then a promo, and then back to the traffic. So I call it traffic you don't have to wait for. Like we had the two news stations. You got Winds on the ones and CBS on the 8. So I always say, don't wait for a 1 or an 8. Get your traffic now before it's too late. Yeehaw! Sirius XM 133, first traffic and weather for New York.
One of the things I like about listening to the streaming 1010 Wins is when they go to commercial breaks. And I live in Austin, Texas, by the way. When they go to commercial breaks, you hear the streaming commercials. So it's, it'll be like, give us 15 minutes, we'll give you the world, whatever the hell it is they say. This is 1010 Wins. Then it'll go to a commercial.
22 minutes.
So 22 minutes. But years ago, didn't it used to be 10 minutes?
No, I think that
Always
they
22?
came up with the 22 minutes.
Give us 22 minutes, we'll give you the world. 1010 Wins. So then they go to the commercials, but it's a streaming commercial. And usually one of the first ones that comes up is this commercial for gun stores. So it's like, get all your ammo and your AR-15s at Joe Bob's gun store right off there on the Riverside Drive. So I always find it very amusing that, you go from 1010 Wins, New York, to buy guns.
Right. After you just heard about another shooting in the city or something.
They would never. You can't even buy a gun in New York. I mean, it's you buy a gun in New York, you go to jail for 20 years.
Yeah. So with traffic, my whole thought was, well, at least the traffic is not going to change format. The traffic service is always going to do traffic, and they started doing news and weather and sports. So it became this whole service content stuff. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be on afternoon radio in New York, and I wound up being there, but just not as a DJ like I wanted to be.
Right.
It became the traffic guy, and it's become.
And you've been there doing it for how long?
I've been this is like 32 years now.
Good God, man, that's crazy.
And every day is a new story.
God bless you.
Whether
do you have a 401k?
I'm well situated here.
Good for
you. I'm vested in the union.
Oh, is it a union gig?
Yes, it's been a union gig, and
You asshole.
That's it. Rubber chicken for John. You're getting a rubber chicken.
Here you were my news lackey at Y107, and now you're union.
Well, you have to. You're not going to get the job if you're not in the union.
I know.
They forced me to join.
I'm just busting your balls.
But I would say, they've done very well. I've got a very nice health plan.
Honest to God, good for you.
Do not let jealousy get the.
No, I'm fine, man.
They've treated me well. The company, I cannot. I don't say a bad word about anybody.
No,
even the asylum.
Except for me when we hang up this call.
I won't mention his name. Yeah, no.
Or the asshole in New Jersey.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, I beat him. Like, I know the writing was on the wall for me. They bought in Tom Morera, who had been like the overnight guy at WNEW-FM.
WNEW-FM. Good morning, everybody.
And they had Tom like waiting in the wings, and I was starting to get. Now we're back to Y107 in 1988.
Right. Now, people forget here, or people don't know that are not from that area. That's kind of it's like a New York bedroom market.
Yeah.
Okay, because you can hear all the radio stations from New York in Monmouth Ocean County, which is the market that we were in. Okay,
it's much closer to New York than Philly. So
it would be like like in L.A. it would be like Orange County, that kind of thing.
Right.
San Francisco, across the bay there into what is it? The county that's Marin County. Yeah, so it's a bedroom community for New York. Most people who live there probably work in New York.
Yeah. So, I started getting I knew that the writing was on the wall for me, that the bloom was off the rose, as it were, and I was going to be up next on the before the firing squad. When I started getting memos about you did not fill out your request sheet form yesterday. Apparently, no one is listening to your show because you have no requests written down.
We don't play requests anyway, so why the hell would I write them down, you moron?
Well, what the hell is supposed to do, you moron?
And then the one story that I wanted to tell you was...
all right, go ahead. I'll shut up.
So, Garrett Card, who was one of our DJs, he had done overnights and he was the evening guy for a while. Apparently, one day he didn't sign on the operator's log. Now, you remember there were two logs you had to sign on. There was the programming log, which had all the commercials.
And the legal operating log for the FCC.
Operating log.
Right.
Now, the operating log, every 2 hours you had to run back to the transmitter room and pretend
Take
like
readings.
you understood what the readings meant and put them down. Usually everybody just wrote down what the last guy wrote down, who wrote down what the last person
I used to
down.
actually go take the readings myself.
I looked at them, too.
Yeah.
I tried to do my best to guess what it was.
The plate voltage and...
the filament or something.
Now, I actually went and got a first class ticket. I had an engineering license.
Oh, fancied up there.
Yeah, no, I went to school for it and everything. Because back then, if you had that... See, they did away with all this stuff. There was third, second, and first. Third was what you needed to be on the air.
Yeah.
Second was all the radio stuff. And first was radio engineering stuff. And first was television engineering stuff. And if you had a first, you could get a job easier.
Yeah. I think I got mine out of like the Corn Pops box or something.
Okay.
You know,
so anyways, back to your story. Sorry to interrupt. I was just explaining for anyone that might be listening that's not from radio what some of these things meant.
But you had to sign on the log and take the readings every 2 hours. But apparently Garrick forgot to sign the log, and whether or not he did any readings, I don't know. But one of the other people at the radio station, the fella that you called the nerdy guy who did a Sunday morning show called the Sunday Morning Soundtrack.
He was a nice guy. He was a nice enough
Very
guy.
nice guy. I still know
he was
him
one of
to
those
this
people
day.
that he's what?
I said I still know him to this day. He's a music teacher in high school.
He was one of those guys that, people would say, he was always such a nice boy, and, he was then on the 6 o'clock news for, like, murdering half of the neighborhood. No, he was a good guy.
I could not see him doing it. Very nice guy, very smart guy, too.
He was a nerd.
In fact, he was the
a computer nerd. Yeah, he was,
he kept those logs going, man. I'll tell you that. But he apparently brought it to the attention of the management that Garrick had not signed off on his log, and the station fired him.
You're fired.
So, I was not very happy about that. And next thing I know, I'm looking at the programming log, or the operator log for the previous Sunday when the computer guy was doing his show, and I noticed he hadn't signed the operator log. So I went to the copy machine, and I made a copy of that. And up on top of that, I wrote, "Ye without sin cast the first stone," and I slapped that baby up on the bulletin board in the studio. And it hung there for a few days until finally I got called into the office, and I was suspended for like 2 days without pay.
Double secret probation?
For my insubordinate actions.
Oh, wow.
And what happened was they told me if you had any production work or if you had to work on your weekend show, I had to come in after 5 p.m. to do it. So I came in and finished up my work, and then I used the 2 days off that I had to go get a place to live in Florida because I was already looking into this new job that I was going to get.
At the radio station that the guy didn't even own.
Yeah, yes. That he didn't register with the state.
Right.
So then I came back from that, and when it was time for 2 weeks till I was going to leave, I called an office with the asylum and his cohort, who I think was named Slurpy Legs.
We don't have to go into why.
I don't.
So Mudman.
She had very long legs.
Now he ended up in the west coast of Florida. When I was programming WIOD in Miami, he used to call me asking for a job all the time.
Right.
With Mudman.
He's been all over the place.
Matt Gross, right?
He was in Baltimore for a while. I think he did Nashville. He was up in upstate New York. I'm not sure where he is at the moment.
He was a very high-energy, motivated young man.
Oh, my gosh. He had come to Y107 from Atlantic City. He had been all over New Jersey. I think he worked in every market in New Jersey.
Oh, he used to tell me about the Jersey station where he worked at. He said,
was up in Sussex.
He was man, this place was run by the mob, man. I won't go into it, but he used to tell me these weird stories about that place.
Yeah. So, Mud was a great guy, still is a great guy.
I kept up with him for a while. And Ian Case, but we'll go back to him.
He's been all over the country, too.
Yeah, the last time I heard about him, I was up for a programming job. I had gotten into this women's talk radio network that I worked at in New York that failed miserably, but that's another story.
Right.
So then I was going to take another programming job for a radio station that was doing an all-women's talk format, and he and his wife were doing the mornings on it. And I think they found...
Oh, that was in Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, and then I think he heard that they were considering me for the program director, and then I never heard from them again. He probably told them, that guy, he fired me. He's an asshole. Which is all right. Look at Minneapolis now. See, would I want to be there? No way.
No.
Yeah, well, he's now a professor, actually, in, I want to say, in Kansas at a college.
Cool, good for him. I liked him. He was a nice guy. They made me fight. If you ever listen to this, Ian Case, there was nothing personal. That scumbag made me fire you. And then they hired him back.
They did.
After they fired me, after I quit.
He worked with me. He worked with me. He did my news.
Guy was such a piece of work, that guy.
Hey, asshole.
The asylum you're referring to.
Yes.
And Ian is an ordained minister. He went to divinity school. He's constantly going to school getting new degrees. He's a PhD.
Wasn't he a Christian Scientist or something?
I think he grew up a Christian Scientist.
And then switched. He fought and switched.
He's switched. And he's not tied to any particular parish. He just... and once in a while, people know the name is Ian Punnett is his real name.
Ian Punnett, right.
He hosts Coast to Coast AM sometimes at middle of the night on talk radio.
Does he really?
So you may hear him on a weekend, or he doesn't do it that often because he kind of backed off on that because he has tinnitus, and it kind of interfered with his broadcasting. But yeah, I talk to him every now and then. In fact, just a couple of months ago, we were on the phone.
Yeah, see, I never keep up with anybody.
Yeah, I had to track you down. I saw you on Twitter.
They all hate me.
Oh, there's a name from the past. I'm sure he has great stories. And then lo and behold, I found you had a podcast.
Well, that's interesting. We certainly talked about a lot of different people. You probably have to go to work now.
I do. It's like work time.
Okay.
So I have to start my real day.
Well, thank you for joining me, and you will have been the first person that we have I always speak in myself as a plurality. That we have had on the podcast.
Wow, a real trendsetter, a pioneer.
Well, like I said, most people are boring, but this wasn't boring.
Well, I hope this wasn't boring.
No.
You could splice out all the boring parts.
No, I'll probably tighten it up.
And you'll have like 10 minutes left.
Oh, no, shut up, Artie, would you? I'll probably tighten it up a little bit. So.
I do want to remind you of one funny thing that happened when we were on the air together.
Okay.
That it was from a listener, and I just for some reason it's one of those things that sticks in my head because I was in the newsroom doing my thing, and I came into the studio, and you told me you had gotten a listener called up and requested a song, and they weren't sure of the name of the group, but they said, "Can you play that song from that group called? I think they're called Lost Rowboats," and it was Los Lobos. We figured out.
Lost Rowboats.
Lost Rowboats. But that's a great name for a band.
Will the canoe survive? Lost. I don't remember that, but that's good. Now, that's part of the whole broadcasting thing, radio thing that the listener never is a part of.
Yeah.
The callers.
Oh, I had a caller one morning. It was a sweet old fella. He called up and he was like, "I am calling to see if your radio station keeps track of shooting stars." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, my wife and I, we were outside this morning and we saw a shooting star, and I wondered if you kept track of that sort of thing."
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Do you know which direction of the sky it was in? What was the azimuth? Well, let me get out the shooting star log here, and I'll make a notation of this.
We pay that little man to sit on the
because
roof.
we keep track of all this stuff. As a matter of fact, if you see any submarines or UFOs, anything, please, by all means, give us a call. We'll take a note of it.
Chicken. If you see a rubber chicken, we keep track of those too. In fact, we got a whole closet full of them.
All right. On that note, Matt, thank you so much. We will.
Thank you, John.
We'll talk again soon.
I'll see you in 30 years.
Yeah. Okay. Have a nice life. Bye. Bye.
It's time to say so long. Sorry to say that it's time to go. Remember this spot on your radio. There'll be more entertainment for you that you'll find so enjoyable too. So tune in on Monday, because that is when that man
John Ford
will be here.